Welcome, I'm Pamela Riccia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Katie Patterson. Hi, Katie.
Hi there. How's it going?
Very good, very good. Thank you. And you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. Doing pretty good out here. It's hot.
Oh, nice. It's cold here.
Yeah, it's actually funny because like New York is like northeast and then California, LA is like southwest. And so we're like literally on the opposite ends of the spectrum here. And it's like in the 90s all the time, which is fine by me because I actually used to live in New York like a few years ago. And I remember 2011, they're like, oh, this is the wimpiest winter ever. And I'm like, this is a wimpy winter. Holy crap, I'm not going to survive a real one. I got to get out of here.
It's so true. Now, just for a bit of context for people, in case they maybe recognize the last name, Katie is Sue Patterson's daughter.
And I'm the other one because we had Alyssa a few months ago, right?
Yeah, we chatted with her. That was lots of fun.
Nothing alike. And I look like my mom, but Alyssa does not look. She takes after my dad.
See, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
And
we've actually had so many people. What was that?
I was going to say your mom's been on the podcast a number of times now, so people are pretty used to that. And I'm really excited that you said yes to chatting about your experience growing up unschooling, because like you said, siblings are very different. They have different experiences. Everybody's got their own interests and passions and everything. So I'm really excited to dive into yours. Just to get us started, can you share a little bit about you and your family? Just to center.
Let's see. I'm the second oldest in a cluster of three. And we come from a military family, so we've been traveling around a lot. I sometimes call ourselves nomads because, particularly myself, because if my dad was not in Kuwait at the time, I would have been born in Greensboro, North Carolina, but my mom didn't want to have me by herself, so she stayed in Dallas, and then she went back to Greensboro. So I didn't really have a set place. So I'm a nomad. I'm a nomad. That's what I am.
Okay, so as a nomad growing up, what were some of your interests? Did you never went to school, right? Did you?
I went to kindergarten, then mom pulled me out for the first grade because she started doing unschooling with my brother, and then she's like, I know what, I'm going to try it with my daughter as well. Some of the interests I grew up, I had little interests here and there, I had baking, I had some writing, I played hockey for a short period of my life, played volleyball. The main interest, and it's actually interesting with this one because the main category stayed the same, but the subcategories changed, which is the main category was performing. I love performing, but it developed over the years. When I was really little, I wanted to do opera, and then that changed into musical theater, and then I did that for close to a decade, and then I discovered, ooh, there's this new aspect, film. I want to check this out, and so I started doing film acting, and now I'm not only in front of the camera, I'm also behind the camera with writing and producing, and so it's interesting to see. It's the same thing, but at the same time, how it progressed over the years. It's really interesting.
Yeah. So what were some of the things you did over the years? Were you putting on plays and performances yourself in your neighborhood with your family? Did you get involved in programs in the town or city where you guys were? How did you do that?
I did a lot of community theater. I did a lot of auditioning through that way for musical theater. And then we also, my mom, she also had a little thing because she saw how much I loved theater. She did a thing called Backyard Productions, where we would have all the other unschoolers in our group. We would do these plays. I think it was Bad Wolf Press or something like that, where they had lots of different plays, and we did Jack the Beanstalk, we did Taekwondo. I remember we did an at-home impromptu Weather Channel thing with some friends. We're we're gonna do this. This is gonna be fun. We're gonna put the camera on us, and we're gonna do this, and it's gonna be so much fun.
Oh, that's spectacular. That's spectacular. Now, that actually leads really nicely into the next question that I had here, because we talk pretty regularly on the podcast about giving kids room to explore their passions fully, even though, sometimes it stretches our comfort zone, because it maybe can feel like they're so focused on one thing. What about the rest of the world? Or, whatever kind of fear is rolling around in our head. So I'd love to hear your perspective on giving kids a space to pursue their passions.
Honestly, I'm a huge fan of giving kids that space, because if I honestly wasn't given the space to like explore, I probably would have just stuck with one genre, which probably would have been musical theater or opera. And I wouldn't have explored all these other genres of performing, like with film and stuff like that. Because that's something that I've noticed when I see parents, they're solely focused on this one thing. Is this going to be their career for life? That can change. It's not gonna, and if you force it into them, if you're like thinking, oh, like for instance, they're like, oh, they're into gardening, they're going to become this great herbologist, I'm going to really dig into that. If you dig into that, I know from my personal experience, if you dig into it, there's going to be some resistance. And you're going to be like, no, back up. Just back up. This is not cool. Don't force me to do this. And in the end, it's sad. Sometimes with that force and that friction, it causes the child or anybody to lose interest in that. And they're like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to go find something else. And so it's better to allow that freedom. That way they have that chance to explore, be like, I really like this, and this not so much. Maybe I'll go into this avenue of it instead.
Yeah, because I think so often, like on one hand, when we see our kids really interested in something, we naturally kind of justify it to ourselves. It can become a career. Right? Mm-hmm. We can get locked in on that. But if we keep that focus, we can, in my experience, if we start, oh, what about this? And let's do this, and let's do this, and let's dive deeper into it. You kind of take that experience out of their hands, don't you? It kind of becomes the parent's thing, because the parent is kind of starting to direct it by saying, oh, well, let's do this because it's going to be really good for you. Let's
it's very much like Rose from Gypsy. Sing out, Louise, that kind of mentality. And it doesn't like the stage mom mentality doesn't just pertain to just the theater or anything like that. It can go to anything. If like the parent is like really pushing the kid and the kid is being very resistant, it's like, no, I'm just trying this for fun. No, this is just something I like to do. Doesn't mean I'm going to go into this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Because my brother, actually, he did a little bit of theater as well growing up. He did some with me because I did it, and he's like, you know what, I'm going to try it too. And he looked into it, or he was originally going to look into being an actor as well. But then he looked further into it. He's like, you know what, this is not really my thing. I'm kind of more into this, so I'm not going to do this anymore. And luckily, both my parents were like, okay, that's your choice. If you don't want to do that anymore, go ahead. And so it just ties into just like allowing that freedom of letting the kids decide for themselves of like, what are their interests? What is it that drives them? Because it could become a career, but at the same time, it could just be something that they just enjoy doing.
Yeah. I love just, kind of the image of of treating it lightly, not as in not taking it seriously, but as in being curious of where it may go, because it may take like total left turns on you or on the child. But I found it easier or to approach it like with curiosity. That helped me keep that and to say, I want to put in as much energy as I can to help the child accomplish what they're trying to do. That was kind of my gauge for when I might be overstepping. If I felt like I was pushing instead of lifting up.
Yeah,
exactly. Can you see the difference between I'm pushing you along, or I'm lifting you up so that you can go in whatever direction you're finding interesting at the moment. But that you do have to pay attention to when you're, because you
have to pay attention on whether it's your kid wanting this or if it's you wanting this. Yeah, because there are parents that are just like, I really want them to go into this, and the kid has absolutely no interest in that. So, and it's action and reaction. You got to see if what it is, and if it starts having some resistance, back off.
Yeah. And then let's take the opposite tack, when they're really into something that the parent might be confused isn't the right word, but might not be comfortable with. Right? Yeah. That might be something that is also challenging for the parent to do. And I think that is more along the line. I think getting more involved so that you can see through the child's eyes what it is the child's getting out of it, that can help stretch your comfort zones too, because so often it's like kind of stereotype ideas of what that entails. If it's, parkour like my son was into, or all sorts of different things, the stereotype image of the kind of people who choose those things can be what's getting in our way, right?
Absolutely. And I completely agree with you that if it is something that stretches a little bit of your comfort zone, first of all, make sure it's safe. If it's not like, if they're not like doing like the knife game or something or other, then you might be like, okay, I'm a little concerned. But like, for instance, with my style of acting, I'm almost like 95% of the time I'm cast in horror or dark comedy or thriller or something where I'm covered in blood. And my mom, it's not in her comfort zone, but she's willing to like explore it and just be like, I understand this is your world. I can appreciate that you love it. It's not my thing. I remember actually one time I had posted a picture of me, like I came off a shoot where I was killing zombies and I'm covered in zombie blood. And she actually texted me going, why can't you take nice pictures? Why are you always covered in blood? And I'm like, I don't know. It's my face. I don't know. So I do, but if she would like completely resist it would have been a lot harder for me to really explore that genre, because I love the horror genre. It's there is actually an interview with Robert Englund, who played Freddy Krueger, where he's like, where the question was asked, did horror choose you or did you choose horror? And he's like, no, horror chose me. I feel the same way, because I grew up doing a lot of spooky stuff. Like Halloween was my favorite holiday. My mom and I would fight on when the Halloween decorations would go up. I'd always say right after 4th of July. She's like, no, October 1st. I'm like, and so we'd always butt heads on that. But and even then, like in my adulthood, the creepiness factor still edged in, because my wedding was a Halloween themed wedding where everybody came dressed in costume. I had Gandalf the White officiate my wedding. And it was a lot of fun. Not the traditional sense. And my mom was like, Katie, are you sure you want to do it? I'm like, yeah, this is what I want. She's like, okay, as long as you're happy.
I saw some pictures. It looked amazing. I remember seeing that on Facebook.
Yeah, but the point being, bringing it back around, allowing your kids to explore those avenues, even if you aren't if they're not comfortable with you, it could lead to something great. Like once again, started off as a spooky kid loving Halloween, and now I make horror films. Mm-hmm. I act in horror films and stuff like that. Who would have thought?
Yeah, exactly. It's that little tweak, remembering that, your kids aren't you. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's easy to say, but it's hard to remember when because we put ourselves in our kids, in their shoes, but then you got to remember, well, they're not me. They have different dreams, they have different likes, they have different dislikes. So I can't really put myself in their shoes. I have to imagine being them in their shoes. Yeah. Now I can see why they love that. Now I can see why that wedding is so exciting for you. I'm sure your mom was doing that.
I know she was doing that, especially with the spooky stuff. She was like, you should just This is like, even with like headshots where she's just like, I love the ones where you're super smiley. And I'm like, that's a commercial shot. Those are if I do commercials, which is far and in between. This is the better shot for what I want to do.
Yeah. Okay, so looking back now, what do you feel you appreciate most about growing up unschooling?
Oh, I would probably say the time that I got, because with the time that I was allotted, I was able to really delve into those interests and like really, really explore them. Like, people who were auditioning for community theater, they loved me because I didn't have a school schedule that I had to abide by. Like, I remember I did Fiddler on the Roof when I was, oh God, I think I was like 13 or 14 at the time. And rehearsals would go to like midnight, sometimes 1 a.m, because it is a long show. And the kids, they're like, we gotta let some of these kids go early because they gotta go to school. And I'm like, no, I don't have school. I can stay late. You can stay late? Yeah, I could just sleep in the morning. Oh my God. Yes. So it was an advantage for me, as well as like great for me to explore my interests. And I got to explore different things that I liked, once again kind of tying into the like figuring out what you like and what you don't like. For instance, something that I did and explored and turned out didn't like: camping and hiking. Indoor person. There's a reason why I'm as pale as I am right now. I don't go out in the sun. I'm a hermit. Camping for me is at a 5-star hotel. But it's something that the rest of my family really loves, and I do it whenever they're like, we're gonna do a family camping trip. I'm like, okay, it's not my thing, but I'll still do it just for everybody. But for me, I am not the one that's going, let's go up camping in some remote cabin in the woods. First of all, that's how the serial killers get you. I've seen Cabin in the Woods.
I have too.
As you can tell, I'll probably sneak in a lot of horror references and stuff like that. That's my world. So
my daughter brought those into our lives. I didn't mind. You know what? Growing up, I was a big Steamin King fan, but then I kind of faded out of that. But yeah, re-embraced it as, it came up. That was something that I stretched around for a while, because my daughter very much got into like that kind of gory makeup and setting up scenes, and there were dolls all rearranged, redressed, all sorts of things. So we played around a lot with that too. So that's really fun.
I love it.
Yeah. But I love that, the idea of time, right? Being able to have that space and that open time to just explore the things, and you can find out all those details about yourself. Like, you learn so much about yourself, don't you?
Exactly. I feel like I think my sister touched upon this as well in her interview, because I was actually listening to it yesterday. With the time that you're allotted in unschooling, you get to really explore yourself as an adult, and like how you're growing up is like, this is how I function. Like, one thing I noticed for myself in particular is like, in comparison to girls my age who went to high school, they were looking for relationships just to have relationships. Whereas if I was looking for a relationship, which was far and in between, I was like, is this somebody I could spend the rest of my life with? And so I was actually really looking at them as a person, rather than, oh, I have a boyfriend and this is so great. He takes me to the movies. He takes me to shopping, blah, 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 blah. No, that was never me. I was always like, okay, let's see. Let me check your credentials. This is not my God. That was me. And I really do. I put that to like the like exploring myself and figuring out who and what I wanted as a person. And like I grew up faster. I feel like I matured faster than a lot of other kids my age. Like, for instance, at 16, kids are like, 16, 17, they're like, I'm getting ready for prom. Me, I had jobs. I worked like 3 different part-time jobs. And when I turned 18, I did college for like 5 days a week. And then at 19, at the same time I was doing college and working 3 jobs, I booked a movie. So I'm like, and people had asked me all the time, especially at that age, and I hated this question. It's like, aren't you sad you didn't go to prom? oh, I was an adult by then. I was like, I've got 3 jobs, I've got college, I've got a movie that I'm being paid to be a part of. I don't have time to worry about really things like prom.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's true. And I think in one sense, in a bigger picture of of society, right, we really do. It's funny, we want our little kids, I've seen that meme around, we want our little kids to grow up fast, and then we want our teens not to grow up, right? Not to get out in the real world and be doing real things, right? We just keep them under more control. So I think that is such a great point, because when you have the space to take on these things when you want to take them on, so often it's earlier than what society typically has laid out for the plan, right, for teens and young adults.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel grateful that I was given the space to really explore myself, really explore my interests, and my life was great. I loved my life. I wouldn't change anything about my life at all. I'm just like, yeah, I feel confident of myself as a person. And I know there's still some stuff I'm still learning about myself, because you're always learning. There's never a time when you're not learning. But I feel like, in comparison, especially in my early 20s and in my late teenhoods, I feel like I had a better grasp of what I wanted and who I was, compared to a lot of people who were in school and conditioned to think this is what society wants me to be.
Mm-hmm. And I want to grab onto that, because that is such a great point about how we change as people, right? And I think having that space to see that in ourselves over the years, to recognize that, oh, I like this thing, and this interest then morphed here, and then I was no longer interested, and I found this instead. To be able to see and understand happily that these changes happen to us, I think is also a valuable thing to bring into adulthood, because without that, as adults, we can feel like, oh, we chose this career path, and oh, look, we're getting into the next question, but we chose this career and then we feel bad, or like we failed if we choose something else. Change that, right? But having had the space and time to realize that we change as people, and that's okay, that's a positive thing. We're now learning something else about ourselves. Like you said, this is not something that stops. We are always learning about ourselves, right?
Yeah, I mentioned before, the thing with Robert Englund and the epiphany of my own of horror chose me. That was actually something I learned 6 months ago. Before, and so that's something that a lot of parents don't realize. They feel like once you hit the age of 18, or 18 or 20 or 21, they should know who they are by now. They should know their life goals, their plan. I'm still learning stuff about myself. It wasn't until about 6 months to a year ago where I'm like, you know what? Horror is the genre. I'm getting cast in horror. I always loved horror. I really want to lean into that myself, instead of trying to split myself into many different things, stuff that could work but doesn't work, or stuff that does not write for me at all, and stuff that just does not speak to me as a person. And so you're always learning, even as adults, even in your 30s, heck, even in your 80s. I remember listening to an audiobook by Elizabeth Gilbert, Big Magic. There was some 80-year-old woman who had studied this thing for 10 years. I can't remember what it was. It was some sort of pottery thing, I think, if I can remember correctly. But she's like, I learned this thing when I was 70. It took me 10 years. I am now an expert. It changed my life. You're still learning stuff, even at 70, 80, 90 years old. You're still learning stuff. And you can change as a person, because who knows? Maybe in my 40s, I'll decide, you know what? I'm going to put acting aside. I'm going to focus on writing or producing, or maybe I'll take the handles with directing, or become a costume designer or something. It's you're always learning. You're always changing. That's how humanity is. You're always developing. And you're always changing with what's your environment and what's going on. Sometimes it's for the better. Sometimes you try it out and you're like, you know what? This was a bad idea. I'm going to go back to that.
Yeah, no, but that's the whole point, right? Exploring. We're exploring the world, we're exploring who we are, we're exploring how we mesh together. You know, a lot of parents listening here are exploring the idea of unschooling and how that can work for their family, and that changes things up. So that's really interesting. Now, speaking of, I wanted to touch on the career paths thing, because, you know, with acting and stuff, and because there are definitely career paths. You know, you always hear, you know, I don't want you to be an actor, right? Because it's not a stable income. You know, you've got a job, and maybe you've got a great job for a little while, but then, you know, the show ends or the movie's done, or, you know, so it's not what some parents dream of, that reliable kind of income, stable life for their child. So I was just curious what your experience has been with that so far. You know, have you had a lot of people questioning that choice? You know, wondering if, you know, are you going to just try this out for a couple years and then you'll go do something else? If it doesn't work, how are you going to decide that? So I was just curious how you maybe answer that, if you've had that.
I've had a few people here and there where, especially in my early days, earlier in my career, where they're like, what's your plan B? What do you do if you don't get work? And here's my thing, and I think my mom actually talked to you a little bit about this as well. I'm not a believer in plan Bs. I believe that if you focus on plan B, you'll lose sight of plan A. Like, an analogy that I always had in my head is, think of your life as a boat or a ship, if you want to be epic. And getting from where you are to your destination is plan A. Plan B is if the ship sinks. And if the ship sinks, you go into survival mode, and you're like, okay, what do I need to do to survive? I need this and this and this. Got it. Done. For me, plan B is just survival mode. And if I need to figure out a survival mode, then I'm going to figure it out. I was like, okay, this isn't working. I need this and this and this. Cool. But for me, I feel like if you focus on a plan B and you're like, I need that security net. I need that plan B. What if it doesn't work? I need this. I need this. You're going to lose sight of plan A, and you're going to be like so focused on it that you're going to, the plan A will just become a figment of your imagination, essentially. Like, there was my friend gave me a podcast, and the initial point of the podcast is that imagine if there was somebody who was really talented, and it was like, for instance, like a celebrity or somebody who's in the business world, and they were like, people going up to them going, you're really talented. You really are great at this. Why don't you pursue this? And they're like, oh, I like this, but I need to focus on just the bills. Otherwise, if I have time, I'll do this. But then they focus on plan B, on paying rent and stuff like that, which is not something I'm saying, don't focus on paying rent, pay your rent. But I'm saying, there's, like, if you lose focus on plan A, if this like celebrity had like chosen to just worry about paying the bills instead of focusing on plan A, we might not see them in the public eye. They may not have risen to become the great people that they are, or they were if they've passed on. And so for me, I'm like, plan B is survival mode. I focus only on plan A, and plan B is only if I absolutely need it.
Yeah, I think that's a great a great way to look at it, because, you know, plan A is really pursuing your dreams, right? Those are the things that you really want to do, that you love to do. And you know, as you're saying, making that work for paying rent, or but you're setting up your life that way too, right? So, you know, you're also choosing when you're not making a lot of income with your dream kind of work. You're choosing, you know, smaller places where your rent is less. You know what I mean? You're maybe doing a part-time job here or there. You know, it doesn't mean that you don't do the things that you need to do to live, but it totally, if you start planning a lot for the backup, I think you're right, that often takes over because it feels safer.
Exactly. And that's another thing that I want to touch on, because like plan A, your dreams and your stuff, it's uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable space to be in for both parents and kids. I have had so many panic attacks and like nights where I stay up and I'm like, I'm scared that this has happened. Like I actually have a fear, not only of failure, but I have a fear of success as well, where I'm like, my life is going to change in this way. And if it does change this way, what if I'm not able to handle it and I fall? The higher the perch, the more dramatic the fall. And my friend actually, I remember talking to one of my best friends from college. I remember talking to her about it, and she's like, "It scares you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Good. That means you care about it." Mm-hmm. And that just stuck with me. And so anytime I feel uncomfortable or I feel scared about something, I'm like, okay, that fear is there. It means I care about it. I'm not going to let it direct me, but it means that this is a really important thing for me, and I'm heading in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the point too about survival mode, because that's another thing I think you get with, especially, you know, with unschooling, where you're making a lot of you're making choices for your own life. Right. And sometimes things go wrong. It's not that unschooling is la, 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 life is perfect or anything. Right. But you learn that in those moments when something goes wrong, you can find the ABC thing that you need to do in this moment, right? You build up that trust in yourself that you can take care of yourself when something happens, right? Because
and
life.
And I think that's something that a lot of parents don't think, especially whether it's conscious or subconscious or not, they don't know. They're thinking, if I put my kids in school, that'll prepare them for those things like time management or survival skills. That's instinctual. That's what survival mode is, an instinctual thing since the dawn of time. And it's not something that you're taught. It's something that you just have. That's just part of you. And I invite parents to like really understand that, like, they know that if they're failing, they deep down, they may have panic a little bit. I've had my panics, my panic scares, but deep down they know what are the core roots of what needs to be done in order to survive.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's something that as you gain experience, because there are downtimes in life, right? So you've made it through. Like here's something and I don't even know exactly how I'm going to get through it yet, but eventually you realize, look, that's happened like 3 or 4 times, not the same thing probably, but it's like, oh yeah, you know I can step up and figure something out. And your kids, over time, you guys get more trust in that as well, because you've had those experiences and we live together through them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're not hiding them when they happen. We're not trying to scare our kids either, but you share at their level, you know, what's going on.
Experiences.
Exactly. So everybody's living together, having those experiences and building up that kind of understanding and trust in themselves that they can figure a way through, even if they don't know what it is now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking of, I'd love to hear what you're working on right now.
What I'm working on right now, I am actually, depending on when this podcast goes out, I am working on a crowdfunder for a horror short film that I have written. The crowdfunder is going to launch on September 17th and go until October 17th, so 30 days. I wrote it. I'm going to be acting in it. I'm producing it, not directing it, because that's actually something I'm like, I'm good. I don't need to try that yet. But I'm really excited about it. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's a lot of spooky stuff. I've been working on the script for like over a year now. And so it's really excited. We're planning on raising 25. We're trying to raise $25K, which is in the film business, really slow, like really, really small. In the real life, it's like, but I have confidence in my team. I've got confidence in myself. I'm like, okay, I'm spearheading this campaign. Cool, let's go. Yeah, that's a lot of like what I've been focusing on for the past month is like prepping for the campaign and for getting it ready for our launch date.
Yeah, that's so much learning even there,
It
right?
is.
Learning all about that funding.
I've done crowdfunders before, but just as like a team member, I've never spearheaded crowdfunders before. So this is a brand new experience for me. Once again, you're still learning. Even nearing I'm like 2 years shy of being 30, and I'm still learning new things with my work and with my life and like the kind of person I am. So it's a brand new experience.
And you wrote it. That's cool. I didn't know that piece. Oh,
yeah, I wrote this thing. It's funny. I actually originally wrote one of the scenes as like something for my demo reel as an actor, and then I went to my fellow producer Savvy, and I'm like, "Hey, Savvy, what do you think of this? Does it need tweaking?" And she's like, "This is good. Actually, this would actually make a really interesting short film." I'm like, "Challenge accepted. Let's try this out. Let's see what happens if we develop this story." And I developed it. I cut some stuff out, and now it's this 10-page glorious script about a man who comes home to find his stalker waiting for him with dinner in the oven.
Oh, that's definitely a nice creepy setup.
It is. I love it. It's amazing.
Oh, that's spectacular. And yeah, the episode will go out during your window there. So I'll be sure to share in the show notes all the links for people if they want to check it out. Go see what's up there too. That's awesome.
Check it out, contribute, share it on your social media, and that would be awesome.
Terrific.
And like I say in my pitch video, this is the one time you can be a stalker and it will be okay.
And please.
Please fuck me.
So there's one question that I'd love to ask all our grown unschoolers. As a grown unschooler, what piece of advice would you like to share with unschooling parents who are just starting out on this journey?
It involves a lot of listening to your child, listening to yourself, and figuring out, okay, like we talked before, figuring out what are our limits and it's like, is this my discomfort or is this my child's discomfort? So it's a lot of listening, and also learning to let go and learning to like let your child explore on their own. If they need help, they'll come to you for help. You don't have to helicopter mom or helicopter dad if you're an unschooling dad. That understand that they can figure it out, and if they need help, they'll come to you. And the second thing I say this in seriousness as well as not so seriousness: the TV is not an evil entity. Do not fear the talking box. It is not going to eat you in your sleep. Because a fun fact about me, and why I bring it up, and because it does tie into like me as a person and me and my career and stuff like that. I didn't really talk until I was nearly 4. Like when I say didn't really talk, I mean, I don't mean I'm talking like this where I'm speaking full on sentences. I'm speaking spontaneously of like how I feel and stuff like that. What I did was I would watch movies, and if a line brought forth a certain emotion, and later in the day, if I felt that certain emotion again, I would repeat that same line that I had the same emotion, because that's how I connected it. And sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. And I was I'm very grateful, because my parents, like, they could have very easily been like, no, don't do that. That's weird. That's not a normal thing. Instead, we turned it into a game that we played at dinner, where we would quote movies, and we'd have to guess what movie we were quoting to, and we would just like play for hours. Like we would have dinner, and then we're like, okay, it's time to play movie quotes. What do we got? Who's got the first quote? Who can outquote everybody else? I won a lot of the times because I was really good. But at the same time, because of that, I was able to develop the memorization that I learned at that very young age, like about 3.5, nearly 4. And it learned into like my memorization of scripts as an actor and memorization of emotions and like learning how to like push different buttons to like bring forth the motion organically, or as my one of my acting teachers told me, living truthfully in imaginary circumstances. And that thing that could have been seen as a defect, that could have been seen as a great fault, ultimately turned into what I am now, where I make a career out of memorization and attaching it to emotion.
Oh, I love that story, Katie. Thank you very much for sharing that, because that's the thing we were talking about before too, right? Being open to our kids and seeing our kids, you know, through their eyes instead of through our lens. You know, and like you were talking about that judgment of this is weird, this is something wrong, this is something we need to fix, but
it's not normal.
Yeah, embracing the child for who they are, because like you said, you don't know, and it doesn't need to be that it turned into a career, but if something
that's just what happened. That's just what happened, and we were open to the possibility that this is something that could have been turned into a detriment turned out to be one of my great strengths.
Yeah.
And it's actually something I'm still really good with. I'm really good with memorizing stuff. Like I always tell my mom, I'm like, Mom, you said this about last week. Did I? Yeah, Mom. I remember.
But that's it, you know, no matter what, if there's something they're interested in or some way that they're seeing things or whatever, we don't need in that moment to understand why. It may be 10, 15 years looking back where we go, oh, I see what they were getting out of it. I see the value, the whatever, the connection, you know, and we don't even have to know ever. But what's important is it's really important to them in that moment, right?
Exactly.
That's how they're engaging with the world.
And another thing I'll close out on this one because I don't know how much time we have left. When it has like I had with like my memorization stuff, don't look at it as like this is a big detriment, this is a big fault, this is a red flag, that this is bad, that this is wrong, this is not normal. Embrace it as a trait that this is who they are. This is what makes them a person. They may grow out of it, they may develop it into something else, it may stick with them, who knows. But really embrace that. Don't think of it as like, oh no, there's something wrong. It's like, okay, this is what my kid is dealing with. We're going to deal with this. We're going to figure out if the kid needs help, or if I just let it be, or if I help develop it into something else that's good. Don't always think in negatives. Try to make it a positive.
Yeah, and that's all part of just supporting them and being with them, because you know what, if at some point they are starting to feel like it's a negative and they want more help, absolutely, you know,
exactly. And that's actually something I've seen a lot. I used to teach dance, and my age group was 16 months to 7 years old, and kids learn like sponges. And so if you teach them like this is a bad thing, they're going to grow up thinking this is a bad thing. And it's action and reaction, and you just remember that they pick up on a lot of things, and if they learn things as a negative, it takes a long time. Like I actually heard a long time ago, it takes a person to hear something positive 20 times for them to believe it. But if they hear one thing that's negative, that it's only one time, and your brain processes of like, this is the truth. It takes a lot more positive than it does negative.
Yeah. That's such a great point. And I love what you said, like, because there's so many ways you can just incorporate that into their life, embrace that this is who they are. I love what you said. You guys ended up playing movie quote games with it, because it's like, embrace it and see that. To me, I always talk about playing with things, always play around. There's always different ways to look at things. There's always different ways to do things. If that playing quote game didn't catch on, you'd find a little something else to do. Maybe it's just memorizing different things, or whatever the reaction, what people didn't like about the quote game would be more clues to what it really was that was super interesting to you, if it wasn't that, right? but we're always meeting needs. We're always, when we're choosing things for a reason. We're doing things for a reason, and if it's not conscious per se, or, a little kid who's not going to be able to say, well, I like this, you can still watch them and put different things in their path and do different things with them to be able to put together the various clues. Well, they like this a little bit more, they didn't like that. It's like a puzzle. It's a really super fun puzzle of figuring out someone that you love, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I actually love puzzles, so it's like, yeah, this is
I love that analogy. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, Katie. I had so much fun.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm glad that I got to share my perspective.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm really happy to chat with you too. And I'm happy that people will get to hear it and have the link to your short film fundraising as well. So before we go, where might people get in touch with you online? I'll have the link to the fundraiser. Do you have a Facebook or something?
I am really active on Twitter. You can find me at Actor Katie P. Okay. You can find me on Facebook, but I'm actually at my limit of friends. You could probably message me, but I'm at my limit of friends of like how many people can friend me. So probably Twitter is the easier place to find me.
Okay, that's awesome. I'll make sure I have that there too. Well, thank you very much again and have a great day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.